direct. So my job as a peace philosopher is to outthink all this stuff, analyse it, and find the solution. We need to reread our Hermetic scriptures. We need to reread our Bible in a theosophical way. We need to understand the harmony between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. We need to understand the teachings of the sages of all cultures and eras and ages. We need to get to the theosophical innermost part behind our outer religious forms. And we need to deconstruct things like anti-Semitism, which is, again, oppositionality carried to its highest form. Again, it was a product of this way of thinking, which seeks to destroy the other. So instead of embracing the other, instead of love, I practice what I call philo-Semitism. I'm a great lover of the history of the Semitic peoples, including the Jews throughout history. All of them, Phoenicians, Arabs, Canaanites, ancient Egyptians. The Semitic, Hamito-Semitic people have contributed vastly to human civilization, including the alphabet, including a lot of philosophy. Pythagoras was half Phoenician. The alphabet was invented by the Phoenicians. What we owe to them is incalculable. How can you be against that? So we got to love the Semites, and because that's also what we are. If you look in your DNA, you probably got all kinds of Semitic backbone there. So yes, anti-Semitism is just it was called an idiot's form of socialism by a clever commentator soon after it was invented as a term. It's an idiot's form of socialism. But so is anti-Gentilism, which is what some extreme Jews do to everyone that isn't Jewish. The thing about oppositionality and bipolarity is it creates its opposites. So anti-Semitism brings up this horrible kind of mirror image of anti-Gentilism, which is your very strict, literal, pseudo-Orthodox follower of Judaism that says that only the Jews are chosen, everyone else is a damned satanic people that can be destroyed. And there are some people that think like that within the Jewish community. I've not personally met them, but you see them reported. Some of the comments are horrendous. And it's there as a current running through the history of extreme, I don't know what to call it, Israelism or this sort of nationalist, jingoist idea that only our tribe is the good one. Well, as a universalist and a philosopher of all people, all cultures, all civilizations and all religions, obviously that's the flaw in the thinking. And it just creates yet more oppositionality. So both anti-Semitism and anti-Gentilism are adolescent mistakes, philosophically speaking. And we have to grow out of them as a humanity. We have to reach higher to the highest. There was a book around when I was beginning my studies of all this stuff called The Aquarian Conspiracy by a lovely woman called Marilyn Ferguson. I imagine she's long dead by now, but we have to rise above the pseudo-conspiracy theory nonsense, which includes anti-Semitism and all that, and rise to the authentic Aquarian conspiracy, which is mutual enlightenment, mutual illumination. That's ultimately what Hegel says in the end of his great work, that how we get out of this stuckness in difference, in otherness, is through the energy of love, through mutual enlightenment, and through co-enlightenment. And this is where I think Biden is a ray of hope. I was listening to his nomination of these scientists yesterday. He's a humble man. He grew up in the real world. He's a Catholic. He's got a sort of ethics in his genes. If you hear Michael Moore on him, who's also a Catholic, these people understand what values are important and why. Because they've seen the horror of what happens when people go down the rabbit hole of oppositional thinking and race-based thinking. The word Catholic, by the way, means universal. It's a term that means the universal truth beyond any one particular party, faction, or race or culture. Catholicism is universalism. I call myself a meta-Catholic and a meta-Mahayana Buddhist. So, and if you wonder how you can be both, well, I'm happy to share that another time. But I assure you can be. And when I was in the Vatican at a World Interfaith Conference back in the 90s, I met some incredible people, including cardinals and Archbishop of Delhi, and I had this discussion with them in detail. There is a tradition in the Catholic Church that respects authentic universalism. And I think Biden, in his own way, I don't know how learned he is in these matters, but that's his tradition, and that of his wife. And also, I believe that's the authentic tradition of America at its best. And that when I heard one of the women scientists saying that she wanted to be a scientist because she wants to manifest love. She loves science, and that's how she wants to help America, her fellow people, and the world. Well, all power to these people, and I sincerely hope that the forces of hatred, division, polarity, and all that Trump represented can just be put to bed, leave the country. Trump should just go and crawl in a hole and not come out for a few years. The guy is a very sad case with all kinds of psychopathic delusions. Let's let this new administration do its thing and come back into the mainstream of world society. Rejoin things like UNESCO, rejoin the Paris Climate Accords, and come to the Paris Peace Forum. I'd like to see Biden and co. come next year when it happens, November. We need America back in the world on the right side of history. And I also, so my job as coordinator of the World Intellectual Forum here in Europe and helping with it globally, again, I say to America, come back, join us. There are greater intellectuals in America. They've been asleep for too long. This man Trump and his demon army have made it appear to the rest of the world that America has gone mad, has become a sort of crazy force. It's not. It's a good and wonderful country. I've travelled all around America. I love it. But it does have this dark history that has to be risen above. History of racism, of slavery, and of war. The problem with America is its propensity, because it has so much power and might, it sees a problem, it drops bombs on it. It's lost the art of fine diplomatic peacemaking. And that's why I've proposed as a project the Nonagon, which is that we build a top floor on the Pentagon and for the American Peace Department. I will be in touch with Biden and his administration. Biden said in his inaugural, sort of practice run for the inauguration speech that he believes America is a land of possibilities. I know what he means. I feel the same. I've walked around San Francisco and Berkeley and Harvard and New York, and you can feel it in the air. Well, let's make the possibility of peace the gift of America to this new millennium. That's what it's worthy of. And this idea came to me when I was at the grave of Leonardo da Vinci, who's buried at Amboise, up the road from me. And he was forced to work for the military. A great genius like that, mathematician, painter, sculptor, designer, architect, engineer, inventor, had to make weapons because they were the only people that would pay him a lot of the time. And millions of people are having to prostitute their genius to work for the military, especially the Pentagon. Trillions of dollars are being churned out to pay people to invent weapons. And it's not buying any security. It's not buying peace in the Middle East. It's not buying peace in Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere. That route has failed. The Pentagon has failed. Now, of course, one could just raise it and say, let's start again. But no, I'm saying let's be polite to these military types. Very brave people. Let's build a top floor, the Nonagon, 9-sided building. And that will house all the activity we need to do to create peace on this planet, from America's perspective. You see, there's no reason the USA can't sign a peace pact with every single country on earth, like a non-aggression pact, like we won't attack you, you don't attack us. That would be one of the jobs for the non-aggression. They could help fund peace studies in universities around the world. We've just had the IPRA conference, International Peace Research Association, in Kenya, which just finished yesterday. And you'll be able to watch it soon on YouTube. My friend Matt Mayer, who lives in New York, was organising it. He's Secretary General now, along with another colleague. And, you know, very high-level discussions about peace theory and so on. Well, these guys need funding, and we need a department of peace studies in every university. It's the most important subject for our planet, especially given that the COVID we're all suffering from is very possibly an outgrowth from the bioweapons program that's going on in many countries around the world, including in Britain at Porton Down, and in America, Fort Detrick, and in China. So I'm going to come to that in a minute. So yes, the other thing yesterday I did was took part in the CND amazing conference online in honour of the TPNW that's kicking into force on the 22nd of January, in a few days' time. Before we next meet, it will come into force. Now this treaty, the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, has been signed by enough countries that it now comes into legal force, and it's done through the UN. And it means that in those countries which sign it, they've pledged never to use, store, transport, or threaten the use of nuclear weapons. Gosh, I mean, it should have been done years ago. This is 2020. That's what Bertrand Russell was campaigning for. That's why he set up Philosophers of Peace, which I'm now running. That's why he set up CND. So finally, it's taken a long time. We're on the path to getting rid of nuclear weapons. And we had a couple of speakers, a very interesting chap, a legal expert, John Burroughs from New York, and a professor of history, sort of Cold War history, an expert, Peter Kuznick from New York, both speaking. And I asked a question that was just in the chat, there wasn't time to hear it. The irony of this situation, because here we are about to abolish nuclear weapons, and gradually I think the nuclear states will join up. At the moment, none of them have. My solution to that is that all of them sign it simultaneously. You see, the reason China or America or Russia or France won't sign it is because, well, they're not signing it, so I'm not going to sign it. So obviously we have to have all of these nuclear states co-sign it simultaneously. The treaty has got provision for nuclear-armed states to sign it, and then over a timed period to disarm. If we had a special ceremony at the UN, if all those 9 nuclear weapon states signed, including India and Pakistan, Israel and so on, then we can breathe a sigh of relief as a humanity. And I want to live through that. I want to organise that ceremony on behalf of Philosophers of Peace, along with the other diplomats and intellectuals working for this. And it's doable. And that's what we learned from the talks yesterday. And that's what we learned from, the campaigning that's been done. My mother was an anti-nuclear campaigner for years, and she would be very happy, looking down from the heaven worlds, that this is now happening. However, the point I made, the irony of this, is that here we are about to get rid of nuclear weapons, and yet, for all we know, the military complex has now decided to go into biowarfare. And we're all suffering this pandemic because either some bioengineers fiddled around with coronavirus and made it trebly lethal, and then it escaped accidentally, or even, God forbid, it was deliberately done by who we know not who. And nobody has sought to action the Bioweapons Convention, under which the UN is authorised to go into all these labs and find out where it came from. That's got to be done. That should be the second thing on Biden's agenda. He's already said on day one he's going to rescind most of what Trump did as much as he can. Good luck. Well, day 2, can you please authorise the Nonagon feasibility study? And secondly, can you action just give a call to the Secretary General of the UN on behalf of the US and say you want an investigation into the cause of coronavirus because you suspect it might have come from a military program somewhere. For all we know, it came from the States. There was an interview by ABC, the American News Corporation, with the chief epidemiologist of China the other day. There's a team from the WHO gone into China, and they were in Wuhan. And the reporter, who's American, asks this chap, who's a top epidemiologist, did the virus come from Wuhan? And the guy says, behind his mask, says, no. Did the virus come from China? She asks. No. Do you know where it came from? I don't have enough information for that. And he gets a bit angry, with the questioner. That's a really interesting exchange. Now that took place only about 3 or 4 days ago, that exchange. So in China, the chief epidemiologist, whose job it is to know where it started, doesn't know. Well, the Chinese also ought to back a investigation by the UN into where it came from. And we should inspect every single bioweapons capable lab on the planet till we find out the smoking gun. And that should include Israel, which is the only major bioweapons capable state that hasn't yet signed that treaty. With all due respect to my Israeli friends, they ought to sign it. And I think, Israel under Netanyahu has become like a sort of rogue state, I'm sorry to say. But once he's gone and gone to prison, then maybe they could come back into the real world like Trump, post-Trump America will, and post-Brexit Britain. Yes, so we have sort of cycles of civil wars going on. The trouble is, Hegel talks about the theory of oppositionality and this desire to destroy the other, because ego doesn't realise it has to destroy itself and transmute into gold from lead and then become capable of love. That's the alchemical path. And the path of authentic, mysteries. And that's the path we have to go down. But until we get there, we have this sort of oppositionality being fought out in cyberspace. We have cyber wars going on as this group are trying to destroy that group. And then other people are kind of ratcheting that up from behind the scenes. Well, we have to grow up out of this consciousness into a place of universality. And that's why I've supported against Brexit, the European Union, because the European Union was a project which arose at the end of World War II precisely to embody that universality. It was all the nations of Europe saying, enough is enough. No more wars, no more hatred, no more oppositionality. And it survived, and I'm living here in the middle of France. It's a very civilized continent, Europe. I really deeply feel for my British friends who've been hijacked by an extreme coup, by a cult, a death cult, based on delusion and, as Chris Wiley's pointed out, sort of online memes that the more you hate in Facebook rules at the moment, the more goodies they get. So they're always spreading things that make you hate more. Facebook really has to get its house in order, as do other social media types. At least they've finally banned Trump, who was spewing hatred through these mediums for years now. And there's a very interesting book come out by Roger McNamee called Zucked, Waking Up to the Facebook Catastrophe. Roger has exposed, what I'm talking about really, the way it's, the catastrophe is that this, pay to hate is the sort of motto of Facebook in the way it's structured. And that's got to change. There has to be a new model devised for social media. We want to keep the good bits of it, but get rid of this evil of polarization that's happened. In fact, a long time ago, I was involved with a project to create a thing called Faithbook, which was going to be based on my periodic table of the world's religions and was going to enable people of all traditions to communicate and chat and and share photos and whatever and talks and quotes. I still think Facebook is a good idea, and I'd really love to talk to anyone who wants to help with that. Restart that project and get it going so it looks kind of a bit like Facebook, but is Facebook, and it's about sharing good news and insight and love and hope and vision. We could design it better than Facebook, which was a sort of spin-off from a Harvard thing by a pimply adolescent Zuckerberg, I mean, for God's sake, let's create a Facebook and let's make it full of good news. Yeah, so Brexit, just an utter catastrophe, and we have to get Remain. And there's I just want an observation about Brexit. I think in my analysis, it's been, well, beyond words for the cause and the reasons for this catastrophe. And I've been speaking about this every day for the last couple of years now, and fasting every day, every Sunday for this. I think one of the errors, or one of the strategies that the pro-Brexit lobby took, was to make it somehow acceptable to the upper classes in Britain, particularly in England, that this was a good thing, this Brexit was a good, acceptable thing. Because Britain is very class-dominated as a society, as I know from having lived there. And if you can get people to think, oh, well, that's what the ruling classes want, that's what those intelligent people in the House of Lords want, and in the Commons, that's what that lovely Tory party wants, well, then it must be right. That's what the Queen wants, isn't it? So then it's right, we'll do it. And it managed to con a few, initially, just a few, of those sort of upper-class Etonian types, that Brexit was, a great thing. Which is like, that's the coup, and it was the mistake, because it's not. And then you had a whole sort of bunch of middle-ranking pseudo-intellectuals like Claire Fox, who'd hijacked the BBC with their spewing out of vitriol and half-digested thoughts. These people are pseudo-intellectuals, but they managed to colonise the BBC from within, as if they are the respectable voice of Britain, and they're not. They're the dementors who've taken over the Ministry of Magic, to use J.K. Rowling's metaphors, and she's right on this because she knows how catastrophic Brexit is. So the point was, you see, Britain is so non-revolutionary in its psyche and its makeup that we all doff our caps. Oh, well, look, elites like Rees-Mogg think it's good, so we'll do it. And then they all vote Conservative at the last election. And the fact that they had Trump's backing, the Queen actually saw Trump and gave credibility to this monster. This, I think, is all part of the mistake. This is how Brexit happened. It was giving that veneer of respectability to people like, Steve Bannon was allowed to talk at the Oxford Union. He should have been locked up in jail for racial hatred. But instead, Oxford University, which hasn't got a very strong stand on some of the most important issues, it took them a few hundred years to come round to realising slavery should be abolished, for instance. And it sent down Shelley for atheism, whereas Shelley, I think, he worshipped Prometheus, like I do. He was a proper poet. And although I taught at Oxford and love it, I also, my heart's with the Promethean tradition, which stands in opposition to this false narrative that the god of despotism is always right. No, the god of nuclear war is never right. The god of despotism is never right. The god of, the kind of smiling face of cruelty is never right. And so there needs to be a wake-up, and I would say that the true class structure of reality is not about money, it's not about elites that can send their kids to Eton and buy the right accent. It's about integrity and truth and honour and proper conduct. And that's why John Bercow rightly wrote in the New European this week that the British establishment were absolutely wrong to give Trump any kind of credence. They still are. thank God he's going in a few days' time. But the damage that he's done, and the damage that Steve Bannon, and the damage that Farage and their ilk, the damage that Boris Johnson has done in the UK will take longer to heal and may never heal. Because I think what's going to happen is against the teeth of all that the establishment can throw at them, I think the Scottish people will be independent, and at that point the people of England will have a huge reckoning to take account of. The people of Ireland will achieve unity. As founder of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Britain and Ireland, I think that's, again, inevitable. I see that Tony Blair is thinking of starting a new party to campaign on a single issue, which is rejoin the European Union. A.C. Grayling has perhaps been in touch with him. I think John Bercow should be involved in that party. The Tories have insulted him by not making him a Lord. Well, as part of my constitutional settlement, the Lords should be abolished. It's a corrupt body, and the House of Lords Appointments Commission, which is an independent body. I was once nominated for the House of Lords, and they kind of vet your thing, and no, I didn't get it. Well, that doesn't matter. I've had 35 meetings there anyway. I don't need to be a member of the Lords. And in fact, I want to see the Lords now abolished, as the Liberal Party does, because it's become just a swamp for sycophants, and the Tory Party have appointed about 50 or 60 Lords just in the last year. I mean, that's just gaming the system. And the House of Lords Appointments Commission protested about one recently in the last few days, and Boris Johnson just overruled it. Said, no, I don't care about that. Of course he's corrupt. He gave millions to the Tory party. That's why we're making him a Lord, and you can get lost. That's how Boris Johnson thinks about politics. You know, he has no ethics, no sense of shame at all, which is why he should not be Prime Minister for longer than, you know, I can, I can think of many metaphors, but let's just hope that he, through a miracle, with the demise of Trump, some dossier surfaces and it shows how evil and corrupt he and his cronies are, and they just have to resign. You know, I mean, in Britain, we don't have this thing that you can't be prosecuted if you've broken the law, if you're a Prime Minister. I think the thing is to find something that he's obviously done that's absolutely illegal. That's probably some dossier in the States somewhere, you know, hidden away in the archives of the CIA. And I think that should surface soon. And you know, good riddance. Because law, ultimately, is what this is about. You know, if you're on the side of... I mean, that's why Hegel, bless him, wrote this huge book on the philosophy of right. It's how law enacts and tries gradually to push human affairs in the direction of justice, which is a stop on the station towards love. You know, it's not the end of the road. Love is the final destination. And if you're lucky, you can, you know, get to love quick. But many of us have to go through law and justice. And people like Johnson and the Brexit lot, they have to go through justice to even begin to get back on the right journey towards love. And then enlightenment is the end process, which I've coined this word enlovement. I think we need to fall in love with each other as a planet, as humans. Here we are in embodiment. Humans and animals together, and plants and trees and other sentient beings, as Buddha said. We need to learn to love each other and build social systems, economic systems that reflect that love. And yes, work on perfecting our social systems and our, you know, the social security systems we have, and the way that we deal with problems like unemployment and illness and this pandemic. You know, we can rethink wealth, we can rethink capitalism and turn it from war capitalism into peace capitalism. And I've been working on some of that, you know, in some of my writings. And I think that we can work with the religions like Islam or Christianity or Buddhism or whatever, not against them, not creating polarized consciousness, but finding that universality within them all, be it Judaism or Islam or Christian or pagan or Druid, or all of these traditions are manifestations of that primal one, which can be enrolled in the project of overcoming otherness through love. And that ends racism, it ends that horrible, Brexiteer, we hate Europe type consciousness, which is all coming from non-love, from hate. The only way we can overcome hate is through love, as Martin Luther King pointed out, who it seems was murdered. There's a new book coming out, was murdered by a conspiracy by Hoover and Johnson combined. President Johnson and Hoover conspired to bring him down as a threat to their conspiratorial regime, which was based on hate and hatred of the other, which was what the Cold War was all about. So I think the files on Martin Luther King are still open. That new book needs seriously looking at, and it was his birthday just a couple of days ago. So, and I've been involved in discussions with people in America that work in his shadow and have been fighting hard to get Biden elected. So let's go on then, as Martin Luther King said, have the courage to love, whatever our race, culture, religion, or even form. I know that animals love too, and they're such sweet little beings. So let's have a good week, and good luck to Biden and his inauguration. All I can pray is that there aren't some right-wing fanatics planning his assassination. I'm sure there are, but I hope that they can be spotted in time, stopped, and that whoever's plotting such a devious, cruel thing would be prevented by their own conscience and by the angelic forces of light. So let's pray that there isn't another assassination being plotted as we speak, and that Biden will succeed and become a president standing for all Americans, and for common sense and rationality prevail, and ultimately for love. Okay. Shalom. Right. Let's go. Come on.